Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Adult Child of Dysfunction. Today, we have with us Mykal Olson, and I'm going to let him jump right in and tell his story. But this is one that is near and dear to my heart because when we struggle with addiction, so often we make the choices that we have to pay for forever. And he has found a way to take that experience and turn it into something so positive. So, welcome, Mykal.
Thank you very much, Tammy. I appreciate having the chance to get on here and talk.
Great. So tell us a little bit about just a little bit of background about your story, and then we're going to go kind of more into it. But just give the listeners an idea of who you are.
Well, again, my name is Mykal Olson, and who I am is somebody who, at one point in time, did something that really wrecked my life, and not only mine, but my family's life as well. And because of that, I decided what I need to do is to help other families avoid that by reaching out to fathers who might also be suffering from addiction and teaching them the process that I discovered in overcoming my addictions so that they can do that to save their families.
Absolutely, because when we are in the throes of addiction, we're not being ourselves. We're not doing the things that we would normally do. We're not making good choices. We're just not. So I love that you just were flat out blatantly honest with me and you said, I have a process. I have a process to help anybody going through this and I want to share it. So let's just jump right in. Let's talk about your process.
Okay. The process that I came up with is a combination of ideas of things that I discovered while I was going through the process. Before I ended up wrecking my family, I tried the 12 step programs and I tried doing some therapy, and neither of those worked for me. So I used some combination of 12 step ideas, therapy ideas. I went and got trained in hypnotherapy, neuro linguistic programming. I did cognitive behavioral therapy for 3 years, and I learned everything I could learn about all of those things. And it showed me the process that I came up with. And what I did is I took it and I wrote a book called Life Forge so that I could talk about my story, tell my tale, and show the process that I came up with to be able to overcome the addictions like I did.
So let me ask you, what addictions did you battle? Was it alcoholism, drugs, sex, food? What was it?
Mine was a combination of gambling and sex.
Okay.
And what ended up happening is the destroying of my finances led to more stresses in my life. And so I sought other ways of being able to deal with the pain and coping with it. And eventually, what it did is led to me to going and committing a crime to make up for all my gambling losses. And I ended up spending time in prison.
Okay. So that was your rock bottom. That
That
was
was my
your,
rock bottom. And it was actually in prison where I discovered the first part of my process, which is I was listening to a motivational speaker, one of these fire and brimstone sports type of motivational speakers that talked about grinding every single day in order to be able to become better. Well, I got really mad because I had ground my life into the dirt. I did not want to grind anymore because grinding to me is a destructive process. So, what occurred to me at that time is I got this vision of a forge because in this forge, you are creating, you are crafting something. Now, you're using fire, you're using hammers, and all this kind of ground, gritty, dirty kind of process, but it still creates art. And I knew that instead of having a destructive process which landed me where I was, I had to create a creative process that would lead to me making myself into something different, something better. So I ended up starting this transformative process.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more. So you got the process. You're in prison at this point. How long did you stay in prison?
6 years.
6 years. Okay, so you had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to self-reflect, a lot of time to read. And for the people out there listening, you've heard a lot of acronyms. So he does NLP, which you've heard me call it NLP. That's the neuro linguistic programming. The CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. So he learned a lot of different techniques, and I love that you put them all together. So do you have like a simple outlineable 5 steps, or how does your process work?
I set it up as 9 steps.
Okay.
And when I do a transformation for another person, I break it up into 4 phases so that when you're in the addiction itself, you can't think of the end process all the way down the line a year later. All you can think of is survival. So we have to solve those survival needs first. Then we can take the next step on the next part of the process. The first thing that has to be done is we have to recognize what is the cause. And the cause is never anything outside of us, it's always that within us. The perception that we have, the meaning that we put behind it, and what our decisions are to change that.
Okay.
So that's the initial part of the process. And that was one of the most difficult parts of the process, is actually getting to that point where I took complete ownership of everything that I had caused to myself.
Okay. So, and that's the hardest part, honestly, even if you're doing a 12-step program, you get to the self-reflection because often you want to say, well, it's the way I was raised, or it was my parents, or it was this, or was that. And yes, a lot of that had to do with what you did, but at the end of the day, you have to take accountability for your actions. And
Yes.
that becomes a very difficult part. And then, okay, so now what's step number 2?
Well, first of all, I wanted to mention that once you get to that point and you make that realization, you become empowered. Because if I caused that, I can also be the cause of something better. I can be the cause of my transformation and becoming something better than I was.
Okay.
So I at least got control over it. And that's the first step that has to be made, is you have control. Then what happened is I had to come up with, what's the way that you can do something about it. Is I had to change me. And this is part of why the 12 step wasn't working for me. Is when you go into the 12 step, you introduce yourself and then you state what is your addiction or whatever. I never ever liked the idea of going in and saying I am a compulsive gambler, because that's identity. And our identity drives everything that we do. It drives all of our decisions, is based on what our identity is. So I had to change that identity. So I had to create who I was by looking very deeply at myself and saying, okay, this is part of me that I do not like. I'm going to change that. And the process that I did is the process of changing that identity so that I am no longer that person that was addicted. Because one of the things that is a misconception, I think, with addiction is that it's based on a substance or a chemical or something like that. Addiction's not about that. Addiction is a symptom of unprocessed scars that we have that we can't deal with. And so we do the addiction to cope with those scars that we can't deal with. It's the same reason why something like a behavioral addiction, like gambling or sex or anything like that, there is no chemical component other than the chemicals in our brain that where we feel better because we're doing the coping mechanism.
Right.
It's all about trying to escape that pain and discomfort that we can't handle.
Exactly, which is why people, it doesn't matter. It's that dopamine hit, it's that instant gratification, it's that release, that endorphins that are getting released by that thing. So it doesn't matter. That's why a lot of people will go from they quit drinking and then the next thing you know they're gambling, or they quit gambling and the next thing you know they're drinking. Regardless, it's not the substance. You're right. It's the cause, the root cause, and that's very important.
Mhm.
Okay, so next, I'm loving this. Keep going.
Well, once you find out that what you have to do is you have to recreate yourself, you have to step into the process and you have to go really, really deep into it because a lot of the things that are the scars that cause it, we've repressed so deeply that we are almost no longer aware of it. So you have to deconstruct yourself, then build yourself back up in the image that you really want to be. But sometimes we have no idea what we really want to be. We've gotten into survival so much that we just do whatever we have to do. And this part takes us back to where we can identify with something that really motivates us. And we have to discover those so that we can build those up.
So give me an example of what some of those things were for you.
One of those things for me was whenever I'd come home with my report cards, I would dread it. Not for the grades were okay, but there was always a statement on there that said, does not use time wisely. Well, back then, they really hadn't fashioned this idea of ADHD. But later, I got a diagnosis of ADHD, and it made all the sense in the world. And I contact my mother, says, "Oh yeah, yeah, we recognize that, but we had no idea what to do about it." But I had seen those report cards so many times that eventually I just said, "I'm not going to be wise. I'm never going to become wise." But that's not true. That's just a false perception that I had made of myself that I would not be that.
Right.
And there are other events that go on that we encounter where we say later on, for instance, I wanted to write books. When I was young, I used to be a voracious reader, reading all these kind of books, and I said I want to be able to write books myself. But I became an accountant. There's nothing creative about being an accountant. So I had repressed those feelings and those ideas of something I wanted to be. So I had to say, you know what? I want to go back to doing something like that. And that's why I actually ended up writing a book because I'd always wanted to do that. So I had to come up with a what can I do that can allow me to express myself more than by sitting behind a desk crunching numbers. And one of the things that really triggered me was while I was in prison, I actually discovered a Toastmasters group. So I went in to learn how to do public speaking so I could spread the message that I have of helping other people overcome their addiction. And I remember the first evaluation I got on my speech, the guy said, "You have an amazing ability to paint a picture with words."
Hmm.
And I thought, wow. And then I can write and I can speak. And This would be great. I would love doing this. So that became a basis for my focusing what I was going to become based on some ideas I had in my past, as well as some information I got from somebody, a complete stranger, at a meeting.
Love it. Love it. So keep going with your steps. I know people are listening like, okay, we got one, we got two, like and honestly guys, if you're out there listening, grab his book because you outline all of this in the book, right?
Yes.
And we're not going to have time to obviously go through all of the steps. I just want to kind of give, and I'm going to interject a little bit to give people little tips. I mean, because this is great. It's not easy work. Obviously, did you work with a therapist through this? Did you work with coaches? Like, who did you work with through this process?
It was a combination of some therapists. I hadn't done any coaches or whatever, but I was always a long time devotee of Tony Robbins,
Okay.
and he does a lot of coaching. So I took some of the things that I learned from his process. I took some of it from the therapy process, but more than anything else, it was just I had created my own process by this is what I need to do.
Right.
And then later, I went and got some of the additional training because I go, well, if I want to teach this to somebody else, I need to know how to teach it. The things that I did, how do I say scientifically this is how I got there because of this step that I took?
Right.
I wanted to support what my process was. And
Right.
I found through these other methods, oh yeah, that's why it worked for me. And it's something that it took a lot of time for me to be able to come up with my teaching process that I have. Um, I guess one of the things I probably could do is I could list off for you some of the steps, because what I've done is I've outlined it as stepping into a forge.
Okay.
So one of the things that you have to do is I mentioned that you have to go into a deep dive into an analysis of yourself. I call that fire, because you have to step into the fire and you have to cause that metal to heat up so much that you can mold it. The anvil is the way that you set your attitude, your mindset, to be a foundation that you can use by which you can work that metal upon. The hammers have to be something that where you are going to work constantly over and over and over while you're working the metal into shape, because it doesn't go easily. You have to have the vision of who you want to be, because you can't shape anything into a final work of art without that concept in your mind first. You have to set up your environment so that it can be conducive to doing the work. Here's an example of what that environment is. When I was getting out of prison, I had no work, of course, but I also had nowhere to live. I was homeless. I could have gone to a halfway house that was devoted toward people that have had addictions, but I didn't want to be surrounded by those people.
Right.
I would rather be homeless, living on the street by myself, so that I'm not surrounded by those people who can draw me back into it. And instead, I found a Toastmasters group that I went to every single week. Even though after we got done with the meeting, I'd go to my place where I would take sleep for the night, because I was then surrounded by people who wanted to grow and improve themselves and were very supportive of my doing it too. So my choosing of the environment was very important toward my success, even though it was extremely uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. Oh, I can only imagine. But yes, it's critical in healing. You cannot heal and fix yourself, especially from something like an addiction, if you are literally right back in the situation that causes it, or the people that are not supporting you, you don't have your right tribe with you. You can't do it. You have to eventually get rid of that toxicity and that element of what you are facing, or else it just follows you. So
Yep.
kudos to you, because that's a big step.
Thank you. Then the final part of it is I decided that I wanted to help other people. Addiction is extremely selfish. We are in survival mode of trying to keep ourselves going. In order to finalize the process of getting out of addiction is to reach out and help others, because that's selfless,
Right.
and that completes the process of getting out of the addiction cycle, is getting beyond that and sharing with someone else something that you can do for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to get you, after we're done with this, for the people listening, I'm going to get you to put that in just that bullet point so I can put it in the show notes so people can look through them, because every step is its own process. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, finding out who you are. I mean, that was number two, right? You're getting just really finding out who you are and diving into that. That's the whole process in itself, because some people have no idea who they are. They lose themselves in their childhood, and then it's, 30 years later and they're struggling with this addiction. And to just say, what do I love? What do I want to be? Who do I want to be? Is unimaginable to some people.
Yes.
So,
And it can happen even later in life.
oh, yeah.
When all this happened for me, I was in my late 40s. So it didn't matter that I had been successful before, that financially I had been set up, that I had family, I had the house in the suburbs, I had all of that. But it didn't matter because I still developed this addiction late in my life, and it totally destroyed me. Because what happens when you get into addiction is your focus goes from here and just narrows and narrows until
Mm-hmm.
all you can think of is that one little thing that helps you survive.
Yep.
And that's what makes it really hard to reach out to people to get them to take the steps necessary to get out of it, is because they're so narrowly focused they may not hear you.
Right.
But but wonderful people like you that are hosting podcasts and allowing a person like me to come on and talk about it gives me an opportunity to reach out and let them hear me so that they can say, wait a minute, this guy has gone through it and found a way to overcome it. Maybe I can do it too.
Absolutely. And I love that you do that. It's millions of children and millions of people have gone through some traumatic things that have rewired their brains to just cope, just try to survive. They're in survival mode sometimes for their entire lives. So the more people we have out there showing, it doesn't matter 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, I had one of my clients literally said to me one day, she said, Tammy, I'm 71 and I feel like I finally took control of my own life. I was
Mm.
like, kudos to you. Now go live it. But it's super important. So tell me, I just in the process when you're going through all of this, what are some of the things you did on a daily basis to begin? Because I know a lot of people are out there listening and going, okay, I know I need to start making some small changes. What would some of those changes be? Would you suggest?
Well, the first change that has to happen is you have to create your mindset on a daily basis. And the mindset has to be, I'm going to look at every decision that I make and ask myself, is that creative or destructive? So that we can choose to use the creative methods rather than destructive ones. because what we end up doing is making decisions without really thinking about them. And when I was thinking about going out to do gambling, was I looking at that gambling as a destructive thing? No. I thought, well, I could go out here and I could win some money. And, well, what if I don't win any money? What's that going to do to me then? It's it may solve the issue that I have of what I'm feeling stress over because of money, but it's not creative. What I need to do is I need to think of, well, how can I create something that will help somebody else overcome their addiction? And so I have to be able to do that every single day rather than get into one of those autopilot modes.
Exactly. And it makes a good point. Like me, I deal with a lot of people and I'm like, what is your ultimate goal? It's out there. Like, where do you see yourself if you had everything, and not monetarily, but just everything you wanted, enjoy, peace, and love, like your ultimate perfect life, you see yourself there. Every time you get to a crossroad and you have to make a decision, that's where it goes. Does this help me or does this hinder me getting to that ultimate goal of being just completely at peace? Like, it might just be that simple. Like, I just want to be at peace at the end of every day. And so every decision, like you said, you go up and you're gambling. It's like, okay, I could gamble and I could win, and that will get me another day, or I could lose and that would not even be close to at peace or on my goal towards that peace.
Mm.
So do you have some suggestions with the mind wrestling you did with, because you obviously mind wrestled with that, because or it would be too easy to say I just decided and then a decision arose and I had to say, does this bottle of vodka help me or hinder me? And I know it hinders me. What are some things? Were there replacement strategies, or what are some things, if you really wanted that you used to take your mind off of that and put it somewhere else? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And one of the things that I did is I changed it from looking at one of the things that I would try to receive and more about what is the person I want to be. And if that person I want to be would not take this action, then I can't take the action because I'm creating myself as this identity. This is who I am. This person doesn't take that action. That person doesn't make that decision. They make this other decision.
Right.
So what I've done is I've taken my identity and I've written it down as to what that person does, what kind of actions that person makes, what kind of decisions. So, and then I look at that and I go, this decision I want to make now, does it fit with that? No, it doesn't. I'm not going to do that. Again, it all comes down to creating that identity of who we want to be. Because when I have that identity of who I want to be, then I can reach those goals that I set for myself. If I go the other direction, then I'm going back to that identity that failed. And I don't want to go back to that identity.
And we all know that healing, especially from addiction, is not linear. It's two step forwards, it's one step back. It's like this. I mean, there's no, I mean, there's a good chance a lot of people relapse, and that is totally part of the program, or slip up. I mean, that's part of it. That's just part of that process. How do you suggest to people? Because I know you probably, if you did, I mean, was it day one from you? I mean, you were in prison. Obviously, you couldn't, well, you probably could gamble in there actually, but
Yes, there is a lot of gambling that happens in there.
that's what I figure. I was like, you probably couldn't, but I'm like, I take that back. You definitely could. So it sounds to me like it was just non-negotiables, and I call those my non-negotiables. When I'm a doom scroller, and if I have something to do, it's the same thing. I pick up my phone. If I start getting a little overwhelmed, my natural tendency is to dissociate and pick up my phone, and I have to mentally say to myself, Tammy, does that help you? get to, same thing. Does it help you or does it hurt you? And no, this is not going to help me in any way getting to my final destination or my final goal. So it's a non-negotiable. Just don't do it. But that's hard. That willpower is hard. It has to be, and it takes a minute. How long did it take you to get to that resolve where there was no teetering?
It took a long time, and I'll tell you, I had a couple of times when I did go back and do some gambling. But what happened is when I did it, I was able to come out of it easier than what I did before. And it was a shorter time period to be able to get out of it. Then when it happened again, it was even shorter time and even easier to get out of it. To the point where I could walk into a casino now and it wouldn't bother me at all because I know that I can get control of it because I have an identity that says I don't need to do this.
Right.
What I need to do is I need to be able to help other people overcome it. And that gives me a much bigger thrill
Yeah.
than any time that I've ever got gambling.
Yes.
That gives me more satisfaction in myself than anything that I ever got from any of the addictions that I ever did. And that's eventually where I want to take anybody that works with me to that point where they are getting their thrills from helping other people rather than being worried about trying to cope with what we couldn't cope with before and doing those actions that made us feel better,
Right.
but only for a brief period of time.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the biggest thing, because that's what I work with a lot of my clients too. It's where is that end goal? And you need to get to that thing. If you have a decision to make, what is that thing that lights you up that you could do instead? Because like you said, when you said that helping thing, every time you say, I want to get to that point where I'm helping other people, you light up, your eyes change, your whole face changes when you talk about helping other people. So that's maybe some place for the listeners out there, work with a coach or whoever, whatever it is, whoever it is, and find out what that is for you that lights you up. Like find out what that end goal is, because it's not always helping other people, but we all have a purpose and we all have a place in this world. And yours is making sure taking your pain and turning it into helping other people with that and getting through that. We all have something. We have a purpose. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that we were all put here with a purpose,
Yeah.
and one that makes us light up because we were meant to light up. So that's I think a big part of it is finding out what that is for people. Because like you said, if you don't know what the big picture is at the end, you don't know what you're striving for, and you will never make the steps or take the steps to move yourself farther into uncertainty.
Yeah.
So, wow, this has been super fun. I could literally talk to you forever about this. um, so I was going to suggest to everybody to get your book. I'm also we're going to bullet point it for them to just kind of have those actionable steps, because clearly you have a process. How long would you say that process took you? I mean, obviously it's an ongoing thing, or there's not a stop sign like here, done. But what would you say realistically for you, that timeline?
I would say that if I were to take this from beginning to end now, without having to create it, without having to discover the processes and stuff like that, I would think that the whole thing would take about a year.
Bam. That's nothing in the big picture of your life.
Nothing.
Nothing. I mean, that's a blink of, I mean, time is all irrelevant anyway, but so I just wanted to hear that, because for the people that are like, oh, this has been, decades I've been fighting this and I have all this stuff and all this crap and all this, that's why we have people like you out there, because that's what we can do for you. When we invest all of this time, all of this energy, all of this studying, all of this practice, implementing it for ourselves, now you can shorten that for people by decades.
Yeah.
Absolutely decades. And that's
Absolutely.
what I always say my thing is. My thing is to get people to where it took me 30 years to get to in 3 months. Like literally some of the tools are like, wow, if someone had just told me that in one day, it changed my life. One day. So, well, thank you for that, for for offering that to people. So if people want to reach out and work with you, how do they do it? What's the best place to reach you?
Well, the best place is to go to my website, thelifeforge.com, because there you can go and download a free report that is one of the first steps that you'll need to take, which is to improve your relationships, because addiction destroys relationships, and you're going to have to rebuild those relationships, and you've got to learn how to do that. So I created a free report to be able to help you with the beginnings of that process. Uh, then you can also find my book there if you want to be able to get my book. And then I have other programs that I'm offering. Like I'm creating a course that should be launched here within the next 6 weeks that you could take, or a group coaching, or if you really want to get deep down in it with me, there's one-on-one coaching that we can do.
Perfect. I absolutely love it. And I love that you focus. I mean, we didn't really talk about men, women, but I love that you said it to me, and I don't even know if you said it on here so much, is that men, you want to reach those men that are literally destroying their lives, destroying their families, and you want to help them get back on track. And I love that because I love that, we're tough as guys. Well, not, I'm not a guy, but you guys are tough as guys. You don't want to come out and say, get help, do this, but you're there to be a support system. And that's
Yeah.
great.
We do not like admitting weakness.
No, no. And that's society doesn't want you to,
Yeah.
but
And here's
you
one of
need
the
to.
things that I really discovered through the public speaking aspect. The more I shared, the more I became vulnerable to other people, the stronger I became.
Hmm.
So allow yourself to be a little vulnerable and allow somebody to give you some help, and you can overcome this.
Amen. Love it. So I'm going to put all of that in the show notes for links and everything so people can get hold of you. Now, if you had to leave the listeners, assuming that, I mean, this is adult child of dysfunction. So God only knows who's listening to this. This is anybody. It could literally be anybody from any stages of their healing to just curious people. What would you give them as maybe something tangible to take away, or just words of wisdom or piece of advice or something from you?
The main thing is that we talked about before, addiction is not about a substance or a chemical, it's about the scars that we have, and we need to get that mental health to be able to get out of the process of destroying ourselves and begin the process of creating ourselves.
Perfectly said. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mykal, for coming on.
Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate having the chance to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will get this out to all the listeners and for everybody out there listening. There's always hope. It, like he said, it doesn't matter how long you've been going through this or how hard you think it is. There's people out there that can help you. Reach out, get help, whoever it is. You deserve it. And like I said, healing is not linear. It's not a starting point and an ending point. It's a journey, but every step forward is so worth it on that journey. So thank you, and we will see
And
you
here
next
is
week.
one of the important things also. We're
Yes.
talking about children of dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
If we as parents can solve these problems before they become problems to our children, they don't have to deal with the dysfunction. So
Oh,
we
yeah,
can save the next generation.
absolutely. And addiction is one of the biggest generational traumas that you can inflict on your family. So every person that you have that can stop it in the tracks. And like you said, the earlier we stop it in the tracks, the less that your children will follow with all those habits, all those coping mechanisms, and all of those survival traits that we unfortunately accumulate when we grow up with it. So thank you for that. That's a good point to make. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay, we'll see you all next week, guys. Remember, if you need anything, love you, reach out.